Hello everyone, this is Stephen from Âtrium Lab. Welcome to this week's Âtrium X Space. This week we'll be joined again by Sundial. Sheldon Hunt will be speaking for Sundial, and it will be the second time we'll have Sundial on. So I'm excited to get an update from them. There's been a lot of news coming out in the Bitcoin DeFi space, so it will be great to get an update from Sheldon, how it's going from the Sundial side. Hey Peyton, we have Peyton here already. Let's get you up here. In the meantime, make sure you tweet out the space so we get a good crowd in here. And I'm sure Sheldon will be joining in a second. We have some great news as well this week, so we'll go through that as well. Hi Peyton, how are you doing? Nah, he's having some.
Can you hear me?
There he is. I was just going to say he's having some audio issues again.
It's my weekly audio issue. Good to see everybody. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's becoming a classic every week.
Yeah, every week it takes me about 2 extra minutes, but it's an exciting day. You know, we just watched Bitcoin tease us all. It walked the line of the all-time high there, which is exciting news. I love to see a Bitcoin all-time high over 100,000, over 109 now. Hey, Sheldon, good to see you.
Hey guys, good to see all of you. Historic day.
It is. It's one of those days where Bitcoin hits an all-time high again. And here we are.
We need more of these. We need more of these days. I'm okay with accepting every new day from here on to the end of 2025 as new all-time high day. I hope that's not too much to ask for.
Yeah, we should make it a rule.
Well, normally we start these spaces off with some news, Sheldon. We've got some news today, but I figured we'd start with some news that you've been a part of. You've been at the Draper University, and that was actually just wrapping up. And I saw that there was a pitch day. So if you could, could you kind of give us, what was going on at the Draper University? What was the final pitch day, and are there any results that are announced now?
Yes, yeah. Well, oh man, there's a lot to talk about on this. So I'm actually here at Draper University right now. I'm actually packing up to leave. So we just finished up the first Cardano program at Draper University, and I would dare say it was a smashing success. So I can drop some alpha on you guys. So actually, besides just Cardano in this program, the Draper University team have historically supported a number of other blockchains in their own ecosystem acceleration. So Stellar is an example. Like they actually work closely with the Draper side, and they've had a few Stellar programs go through. And in the last cohort, where I think they had I think it was more than 20 projects from Stellar. 0 of them got any funding or any offers of funding. Whereas in the Cardano group, we've been told again and again that actually the quality of Cardano projects is far beyond what is actually standard in the blockchain space, and has actually really impressed many people here in Silicon Valley. That Cardano entrepreneurs are focused, dedicated. There's a real community. There's an actual sense of business, a sense of product market fit and addressable markets, and a level of professionalism that isn't actually seen elsewhere in the blockchain space, which was huge to actually hear from VC investors in Silicon Valley. So that was a big pat on the back for the Cardano community as a whole. And we're looking at probably 6 or 7 projects here getting some kind of offer of investment out of the 20. But we'll see. There's no guarantees. There's going to be a lot of back and forth negotiations. Maybe 0 of them actually take up the offer, or maybe we have more than that. We don't know. But the overall kind of outcome or the consensus is that Cardano is ready for the big time. We are ready for more projects to be engaged with Silicon Valley. And yeah, if you guys are listening in, you're entrepreneurs and you are building on Cardano, it's never been a better time. So they're looking at doing more with Cardano going forward. There's always like new cohorts that are planned. So yeah, and like the actual pitch day was on Monday, and I would dare say it was it was very intimidating to pitch to Tim Draper. He has been doing this for 40 years. He knows Elon Musk really well. He knows all of these guys. Got Skype going and Hotmail going, and all of these OG tech companies in the United States basically created Silicon Valley as we understand it today, which is just amazing. And to have him hear us pitch about Cardano was really cool. And so, yeah, we had a really good time. Very intimidating. Everybody nailed their pitch. Everybody actually just knocked it out of the park. So it was very, very impressive. And so we'll see where we go from here. But I think we're all kind of ending on a high. And all of the projects that were here together, we're all much stronger for it. There's a lot of synergies. And so we've partnered up, and there's going to be more to come. So keep your eyes out for further collaboration. And
I
that's
think we lost. Okay.
Hey, I could
lost you
still
there.
hear him.
Okay.
I think that was actually you, Stephen. Go ahead, Sheldon. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's going to end just saying, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot more partnerships coming in the next little while. Because it was, yeah, the big success here. And yeah, just for having all of these founders together for 5 weeks, it's a lot of time to spend together. So a lot of synergies that we just couldn't do together over just, yeah, virtual meetings. So we were saying basically you could get together and knock out in an afternoon something that could take months remotely, which is pretty cool.
And are there any next steps or things planned in the whole Draper U pipeline? Is this the last event, or is there more coming?
So this is the end of the first cohort for Cardano with Draper U, but we're hoping that there's going to be many more to come. That's the whole idea. Like the Draper team, as I was mentioning, they've been really impressed with the quality of the Cardano projects. Been very kind of blown away by the level of professionalism. So there's a desire on the part of the Draper team and others here in Silicon Valley to have more Cardano entrepreneurs come. So we'll see about what could be organized in the future. But I know for this cohort, there are going to be ongoing discussions around funding for the next couple of weeks because we finish up the program. They've indicated that they want to invest in several projects, and there's actually additional projects they want to continue to talk with as well to kind of explore. And so there's no guarantee of success, but there's like a few different very interesting propositions that kind of exist out there. But it's going to be a little bit back and forth. You got to agree on valuation and the best way to kind of bring in the funding as well. What would be like the best raise amounts? Who else would maybe join the ticket? So there's a lot of back and forth preparation work that's going to go on to kind of lock in these deals. But it's all looking quite good. For any of you guys who are entrepreneurs yourselves and you're doing stuff in the Cardano space, do think about going forward how you would want to actually best fit and balance VCs with community as well as any kind of like tokens you might issue. Because it's become pretty clear if you go and you do like the token first approach, which is generally how a lot of us do it in Cardano, you could put yourself at a bit of a disadvantage later on if you want to talk to VCs. But in any case, there's more details that I could go into about the actual specifics of what we learned here, but it was very, very useful. So a lot of good stuff coming up.
Thank you for the update on that. We were kind of all watching from home and cheering you guys on out there. Tim Draper was honestly a bit before my time. The first time I had ever even heard of Tim Draper was for this Draper U Academy for you guys. And, as I've come to find out, he's been very valuable in Silicon Valley in the past. And I think that, the Cardano teams are a bit more professional. Of course, you have these really big and large and great teams on Ethereum, and I'm sure there's a few on Solana as well. But, kind of the general consensus, at least that I've seen anecdotally, is you go to a conference and we kind of poke jokes a little bit, and we can be like, oh, that's an ETH guy, just from his jacket and his pants. And I've noticed a bit more professionalism. Definitely within Cardano, I'd say on average. Not that there isn't professional teams on other chains. So, yeah, thank you for that update. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We're gonna have a great show today. We do these every Wednesday at 16 UTC. I'm happy you guys are all here. We start off the show with a bit of news. We do an Âtrium update. We bring a new project on every week to learn about them ultimately. What do we have so far on the news today, Stephen?
We have a few more things, but perhaps you can continue on the podcasts that you did with Charles and the new CEO of Emergo. Give like a short summary of those.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I traveled last week. I flew out to Toronto about 2 weeks ago. I tagged the new CEO of Emergo. His name's Philip Pon on Twitter. I said, hey, I'll fly out to Toronto if you're willing to give me an interview. I didn't have any tickets booked. I wasn't really planning on going. I've been trying to, stay home and not travel as much to get a bit more work done, different kind of work anyways. And he, gratefully, I'm grateful that he agreed. Within a day, he responded, said, "Let's set it up." And they had a nice room for me, and it was as simple as that. They didn't ask me for questions beforehand. They weren't harsh on me as an interviewer. It was just like, yeah, come on, here's the room. They weren't stressing on time or anything. It was a very genuine interview ultimately, and I sat down with them, and I also asked the community for a bunch of questions as well. And I took some of those questions, and, some of them I think were a bit too harsh. I think people need to realize that, how businesses actually operate. And that, when you kind of come to the negotiation table, you can't ask for everything all at once. Like some people were posting like, get him to show his balance sheet and all of this stuff. And, I think that it was a bit unfair. People need to realize, one, he's a new CEO, right? So you can't really, get on him for the past of the company. They're obviously kind of willing to come to the table at this point, right? They're doing their first interview publicly like that. And, there are really two big things. There's one big thing I wanted to bring up, and it was the way that Yoroi was designed. If you go into Yoroi, there was a huge button that says delegate to Yoroi DREP, and then I thought that was too much. Within Âtrium, when we launch DREP delegation, we're not going to put a big button there that says delegate to Âtrium. We're going to teach people about DREPs and, how to pick the right DREP and, tell people that they should pick a DREP that, kind of agrees with what they ultimately believe in and not what we believe in, because that's how you kind of drive decentralization through user experience, right? And, I kind of brought that up and I said, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. Any developer, they shouldn't be essentially driving, power in this system to themselves through UI, especially when the users are uninformed, right? I think it would be a bit different if that button, was real big and it said, here's what your ROI stands for, and by delegating to us, this is what you can expect us to vote on. And in reality, it just said delegate to Yoroi DREP, and then there's an on-chain requirement of people to delegate to a DREP to claim their staking rewards. And Philip responded to that by saying, well, we believe that all of our users are really educated and informed, and I think that that's not true. Without the education existing within Yoroi on this. And I say that, because I've run a channel focused on education for the past 5 years. In education between people that are listening on a Twitter space, the people here now, and the guys that just bought ADA and they, work normal jobs and they check in, once every couple of months. So, I felt that kind of wasn't a good response, and I pushed a little harder on it. And he stated that they're actually going to make changes. He said that they're reviewing the UI and UX at Yoroi to make it kind of more fair. And I also propose that, they should, include education. We're doing that at Âtrium, but I think it's needed everywhere. Ultimately, we'd like, users to use Âtrium. I think, one day if, Yoroi continues down a good path, people will be able to use Âtrium with Yoroi, of course. But I think that, it's important for users to be educated and the decisions that they're making be informed decisions ultimately. So that was pretty big. I was happy to see him kind of make that change. And then he also stated in the podcast that Emergo no longer right 94 wallet. So I thought that was pretty big news. Charles, I asked Charles the same question back in December when I was in Argentina. I said, Charles, are you going to vote with, Genesis Ada in Cardano governance? And he stated no. That the founding entities should not vote in Cardano governance with Ada. So, that essentially means I've gotten, two of the three founding entities to, state that they're not going to vote with Genesis Ada on my podcast. And there's one more to go. I just don't think it's gonna ultimately work. Other than that, I spoke to, the midnight booth, and I got to say, I was definitely getting pretty excited for midnight. Speaking to some of the team members, I would say that it feels that they're a bit closer than everyone thinks. Shelly took a long time. I remember like wanting to start a stake pool in 2017. It didn't come till 2020, so you kind of expect that with midnight. Like, it's going to be good. They're cooking, but it's probably going to take a little bit of time. Well, from my perspective, speaking to the team, it seems like it's coming a bit quicker than we all think. And it seems to me, kind of what I've gathered, that Brave, that big Brave partnership that we saw get announced last week. I don't know if we mentioned that in the space, but Brave has 80 million users, 30 million daily active users, and they're doing a Cardano integration. And I read a little bit deeper into that integration, and they're going to be offering, governance tools within the Brave browser, which is kind of interesting and unique. And, Midnight is also a part of this partnership. So, essentially what I imagine is the Midnight airdrop that's going to be done on the Cardano blockchain is going to use Brave to market this, to tens of millions of people all at once. And, I speaking to, some people around there, from what I've heard, that the Brave was just the first of many partnerships to launch over the next year. So, exciting things to come, for both Midnight and the Cardano community, from what I've heard. And then the Charles podcast that I did, I would say that we had a very serious podcast about 4 months ago in December. It was talking about, the U.S. government and regulation and governance and Genesis Ada. And, we're going to be doing one, I think, pretty soon, on purely on Midnight. So with this podcast, I tried to make it a bit more fun. I started off with, some U.S. regulation stuff, some Cardano stuff. I asked them about the bullet ants, and also I asked them about, kind of AI. It seems like everybody's so worried that everything's going to change now because of AI, and I kind of wanted to get his take on it ultimately. So yeah, I had a good time in Toronto. It was nice to see, the Midnight booth out there, some of the community out there. I got to see Sheldon out there up here. What about you, Sheldon? Any alpha, from Toronto that you can share with us?
Yes, yes. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, exactly. Like in the tent, everyone's welcome.
We can hear you.
Okay. Cool. Yes. Sorry, guys. It was just there. But yeah, so there's quite a lot of alpha coming out of Toronto. So as you were saying there, Pate, some of like the pretty cool stuff, as you were mentioning about like Midnight having some pretty big partnerships. They actually have over.
Did you lose him, Stephen?
Yeah, I also lost him. I thought it was me again, but
I did too for a second. I was like, maybe it's me. We'll see him back in a minute. He's actually currently packing up in Silicon Valley right now, so we may have some interference. Sheldon, are you back with us?
I'm seeing two Sheldons now, so we'll have double fun, I guess. There he is.
You back, Sheldon? He's back down as a listener. We'll give him a second. Trying to think of any other. I just posted my podcast with Natalia Amaline. She's actually Vitalik Buterin's mom, and she works with the Canadian government to educate people in crypto. It was an interesting podcast. I enjoyed it. It was a little side quest, as I call it. Sheldon, you back with us?
Hey, dude, can you guys hear me all right? Am I back?
Yep,
Yep.
you're back. We can hear you.
Okay.
Thanks for coming back.
Oh, sorry about that, boys and girls, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Just having some unreliable signal here at Draper University in Silicon Valley. Hard to believe, right? The home of tech.
I'll blame
It's not perfect.
Twitter.
Yes, that's the way to do it. But no, sorry, I was cut off there, and I was mentioning about some of the alpha coming out of Toronto. But as you were mentioning there, Big Pay, like there was actually like over 100 partnerships that Midnight has together, and only a fraction of them have been kind of hinted at. And the same thing with Sundial. We have over 60 partnerships, and also only a small amount have gone out. So we actually think that the big season of Cardano, the Cardano side chains, partner chains, layer twos, it's all just going to be kicking off. So it's a really, really exciting time. There's going to be a lot coming down the pipeline.
So completely unrelated, I wanted to mention that the space is called Alpha Hour, Sheldon. So don't hold back.
That is a very good point. I will not hold back. So yeah, so a lot more alpha.
I would say we've done pretty good so far, as far as every Wednesday. But this one specifically, the first 20 minutes were full of a lot of alpha so far. So, let's get into to Sundial. We had you on before. We might have some new people in the audience. Very briefly, what is Sundial before we kind of get into the weeds a little bit?
Yes, of course. Well, so Sundial, in very simple terms, is essentially like Cardano's first comprehensive layer 2, and it's custom built specifically with the guys over at Midgard, Fluid Tokens, and then many of the other guys elsewhere in the ecosystem to create basically the go-to hub for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cardano integration. And so we are basically charging ahead with providing a solution to some of Bitcoin's issues, right? Around smart contracts, around yield generation, around just having essentially self-custodied Bitcoin DeFi, which to date hasn't really ever been done before. We've got a lot of other quasi-Bitcoin L2s that are somewhat operational, but they're very imperfect. There's issues around security and custody, issues around yield generation, issues around just like the fundamentals of how it works, about their ecosystem. So there's a lot of problems we see out there in the space more generally. And we think actually using the Cardano tech stack, the Cardano community, and the ecosystem, we can solve for all of this stuff and do it in a very comprehensive way without needing, and this is a very important thing, without needing to change Bitcoin. Because many other Bitcoin layer 2s, be it Starknet or Arch or any of these other guys, they all require a change to Bitcoin, be it like OPCat or any of these other things. And so we in the Cardano space are sitting very pretty. The alpha there is that we've got UTXO solutions to UTXO problems, and that we're actually in line with a lot of the Bitcoin maxi narratives. So it's pretty remarkable, actually. So I would dare say if we do this right, in 2 years' time, Sundial and Cardano are the only go-to spots for Bitcoin DeFi integration. And so we become the center hub of the Web3 space. It's very grandiose, mind you, but I think it's absolutely possible. And so we are looking at doing a testnet in the next couple of months and then having the mainnet launch end of this year or early next year, depending upon how things go, of course, because there's a lot of moving pieces here and the tech is big. The aspirations are big. And I guess some more alpha for you is that we are going to be going to Las Vegas next week for the Bitcoin conference. I think we've got on the Cardano side of things a lot of amazing partnerships locked down, but now it's about making inroads to the Bitcoin community and letting them know that, hey, we are with you guys. There's no need to worry about compromises on the Bitcoin side of things. It's a mutually beneficial layer 2 here. And so, yeah, so that is kind of like the long and the short of it. Beyond just like Bitcoin DeFi, there's so much more we could do with the layer 2 being essentially having like programmable assets on the base layer. So you can actually look to have integrations with some big stable coins without needing to make any changes to Cardano. And there's a bunch of other things as well. Don't need to get into all of it, but there's a lot. And so we're incredibly optimistic. There's a lot of excitement even here in Silicon Valley for what we're doing. And so we feel the wind is in our sails and that we're set to kind of change the game when it comes to the whole ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, you're like a crypto rock star, Asia to Silicon Valley to Toronto, and Now you're going to Vegas. I've really been excited for the Bitcoin integration on Cardano. It just seems like the stars are aligning. It's like a match made in heaven, as you mentioned, with the the similarities in UTXO. I mean, Cardano was even labeled extended UTXO in the very beginning before this narrative even came out, because it works in a similar way. One thing that a lot of us, I think, are trying to piece together, because we're kind of not on the inside here, is what are the players kind of in it, like it seems to us that there's multiple teams kind of competing for this integration, even within our ecosystem. I did a podcast with Bitcoin OS a couple of weeks ago, and I saw some shade kind of thrown around that, from my podcast. This one guy was saying, "Oh, I shouldn't even have done the podcast with him." I'm like, "Well, we can't even talk to people nowadays." And then, you hear Charles. Charles is going to go to the Bitcoin conference as well. And, at the Bitcoin conference, he said that he's going to be demoing, essentially a bridge from Bitcoin to Cardano. So, are you working with Charles? Are you working with Bitcoin OS? Are you guys kind of, a team that's kind of competing on this integration? I think it's best for us to kind of understand this layout from, starting with the people that are working on it ultimately.
Yes. Well, actually, and this is it's a very good question. I think a lot of projects have struggled, and we're not actually communicating to the wider Cardano community as much as we should as to what we're aligning on and the things that we are kind of actually collaborating on. And so, interestingly enough, we're basically all aligned. The whole idea, and this is something that I had talked about with Charles a few months ago back at ETH Denver, that we were kind of sitting down over breakfast. We're saying we need to actually get these things going, and it doesn't matter who's doing it, where and when. We just need to have some truly function bridges or bridgeless solutions that get Bitcoin and Cardano together. And in the time since, we've actually been communicating much better and more smoothly across multiple projects. So actually, last week, Yago and Charles met and they were talking. I was actually meeting with Yago just yesterday. There's the guys at Fluid Tokens who have their own solution, and we're all actually synced up. The whole idea with Sundial, to kind of take it to the next levels, we have multiple horses in this race. So we are working with also BitLayer out of Singapore. We've got a number of other Bitcoin bridge partners that we have not announced, some really big guys. And so the whole idea is you have multiple horses in the race, and we'll see who kind of comes out on top, because there's actually all slight differences in all of their various solutions. Some are trust minimized, some are trustless, some are wrapped, some are going to be faster to market, some are better kind of TVL. So there's all of these various different features, functionalities, all these different teams. They're competing in their own small ways, but ultimately it's all to the benefit of Cardano and Sundial through this integrations that we all plug in together there. So that's a very good thing. And so I'm ultimately very optimistic. And actually next week, as you're mentioning, Charles doing the demo there. So we are also there as Sundial, and we're there with the Fluid Tokens guys and IOG and many others, because we are all linked up. And one of the big plans for next week is actually to have Charles and some of the other guys have a bit of a round table, and we will all be synced up, detailing our current progress and where we think we go from here. And so, yeah, we are all speaking from the same page here, singing from the same hymn sheet. So it's quite exciting. And so, yeah, only up, I do believe. There's going to be competition, of course, but that is necessary for what we're doing here. We've got to keep people kind of hot on their heels.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because one of the, let's say, fears that I had was with all these competing teams, there would be 3, 4, 5 different solutions being launched, and every dApp on Cardano that wants to get in the game needs to integrate 3, 4, 5 different solutions and be compatible with all of them. So this fragmentation is would potentially be an issue, I guess. But if collaboration is going well and teams can align as much as possible without being 100% the same, of course, that would be great, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Nobody wants more fragmentation. They don't want to have to worry about all of these issues around just trying to essentially herd cats. But that's actually one of the things that we will be doing on the back end with Sundial, to kind of make it easier for the various dApps and other builders, just like retail users, to get access to Bitcoin DeFi through Cardano Tech, through these multiple bridge solutions. Because the whole idea is optionality. You got to have some choices, but it's got to be streamlined. It's got to have a really, really easy to understand user interface that is just smooth. And so that is what we're going for here. It's going to take a few months, but we believe it's going to be absolutely exceptional. It's going to be incredible. So yeah, it's happening.
Awesome. That's exciting. I'm glad to see some unity on that front. And I think that when you have a bunch of smart people all working on something, people are going to think of different solutions for the same problem, and it allows people to discuss what the best solution is between all of the different kind of idea generators there. So very happy to hear that. I'm kind of getting a little Bitcoin conference FOMO. I looked at the flight to Vegas, and it's not happening. It's not happening. But I wish you guys luck out there. I hope you guys open up the Bitcoiners' mind to the Cardano community. I think ultimately what it's going to come down to, I hear this kind of narrative pushed that the Bitcoiners aren't going to do this, and I saw quite a lot of Bitcoiners lose $1 million in Celsius just 3 years ago, and they were handing their keys over to Alex Machinsky saying the banks aren't your friends. So I imagine if we actually have a protocol that is essentially decentralized by a bunch of different node operators, that being Cardano, and then you have another protocol living on a layer 2, they may be open to this if the only added risk is the smart contract risk, especially if they trust the smart contract language and the chain. But there's still one thing missing: incentives. So will Sundial offer incentives to people that bring their Bitcoin to Sundial? Is there going to be a Sundial token that kind of incentivizes people to do this?
Yes, well, so it's a huge, huge point you bring up there, Big Pay. Like, incentives matter, and I think it's something that a lot of people kind of take for granted. It can be done very poorly in this space, right? We see a lot of the essentially farmers, right? Like airdrop farmers who just go around sucking up stuff. A lot of teams do stumble pretty significantly when they're trying to roll out incentives. And so it's something that is essentially a central plank of what we're doing here with Sundial, where you need to have incentives that matter and that will be sustainable over the long run. And a big part of that is also generating yield. And so we want to be able to have, through our various partnerships, have sustainable, safe optionality related to like yield generation and staking for Bitcoin holders. We can do things today that we couldn't do 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And so there is like some technological innovations that allow for a more safer exposure to yield generation. And we've got some innovative solutions that we're rolling out and making public in the next several months that I think are going to be very interesting. And then, as we've all kind of known and heard about for quite some time, Babel fees coming online and everything else, it's going to be a key feature of what we do with Sundial, where people can actually earn rewards in Bitcoin. On the back end, there is essentially like an atomic swap. We'll have ADA and Sundial tokens be swapped for Bitcoin. So we're buying Bitcoin on a regular basis to further kind of incentivize and boost up Bitcoin's valuation over time. So that's another like synergetic kind of win there. But yeah, incentives matter. We've got to be able to give people an authentically Bitcoin experience. So as I say again, right, like UTXO solutions for UTXO problems, and that can be done with Cardano, decentralized and self-custodied. So it's going to be a very interesting thing. And I think we're going to solve for a lot of the problems that we saw that last cycle, where people did, unfortunately, put a lot of trust in these centralized actors who didn't have people's best interests in heart and were quite sketchy in how they kind of conducted themselves business-wise. So yeah, we've got a much better solution today, and we'll roll it out over time. Of course, we want to have, again, optionality, because fundamentally, there's probably going to be like more or less like a zero. There's no like zero risk when it comes to blockchain, as we kind of know. There's some risk in basically everything we do. So we want to allow people to be kind of eyes open to some of the security concerns, and they can choose their risks appetite for the various yield generation. So we think that's going to go a long way as well.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm curious to hear all about it in the upcoming months. So one question that I had was, we've always been good at the tech side of things in Cardano. Where we have been lacking is the liquidity side and the large partnerships and the large partners out there, both in Web 2 and Web 3. So are you taking care of that as well? Is there something that you can say about? Yeah, you've been in Silicon Valley as well, so I guess there's a lot of liquidity and Bitcoin there as well. So something you can share on that front.
Yes, absolutely. Because you bring up a very valid point, right? We've been looking at the Cardano ecosystem for quite some time, and I think many people have identified the same issue again and again as kind of being a standout problem, and that is liquidity, right? And it is a lack of further adoption. A lot of like the Ethereum layer 2s have kind of drawn a lot of attention just from some of these corporatist partnerships and gets people excited, but then there's actually not much happening under the hood. So there's like partnerships, but they have to be impactful. They need to mean something. And what is super important about what we're doing here on the Bitcoin side of things is we're mutually benefiting each other's ecosystems by providing for things that we don't have in our respective spaces. Right? So Bitcoin has a lot of liquidity, but there's really no yield generation, there's no utility, there's no smart contracts, there's not much you can do with it. Well, we've got that solved on the Cardano side. And what we've been lacking on the Cardano side is liquidity. We can now tap into Bitcoin's liquidity. Even if it's only a small fraction of Bitcoin's available liquidity, it will still be orders of magnitude more significant than what we currently got. So any small drip from the Bitcoin bucket will be a massive wave in Cardano, and we'll just be starting there. That's just the beginning. As for partnerships, yeah, like as I was mentioning early on, we've got more than 60 partnerships on the Sundial side of things today. Like we've got so much cooking, and I can't really get into details because it's still quite early on. But a big part of that are having liquidity partnerships, major market maker partnerships, working with some of the biggest exchanges, working with major financial institutions around the world. And so we want to actually have this be the grown-up solution for Bitcoin DeFi, just built on Cardano. Under the hood, we got the best tech. It's battle tested over 7 years. So there is something to be said there that is attractive to many who would like to deploy in a safe way. So yeah, keep your eyes open because we're going to have some like pretty impactful partnerships being announced over the next several months that I think will further the narrative that, yeah, Bitcoin and Cardano are meant to be together.
I'm excited to kind of see the further narrative come out, what you guys have been working on, the different partnerships. If you're just tuning in, we host these spaces every Wednesday at 16 UTC. If you're enjoying it so far, leave a comment down below. You can click that little comment button. Say, if you have any questions, you can put in there. If you have other questions, you can also request speaker. But that little purple button is if you have some stage fright. You can put your questions down there. So I'm curious about from the user experience and also the dApp developer experience, right? So if let's say you're building a project called Âtrium, and there's a lot of users that are really excited to use Sundial. What do we integrate? Are we essentially running a different node, or are we kind of using an API? What does this look like from the developer experience, and then what do users see? Is there just going to be like a little button where they click and they're on the Bitcoin network or they're on the Sundial network? What do you think this is going to look like?
Yes, well, so as I was mentioning before, we need to keep it as simple as humanly possible here. And so we've been talking about this with Charles. We've been talking about it with all of the wallets. So we want to get to a spot where, yeah, people can, as Charles was mentioning, essentially have a click of a button and then you are engaging with Bitcoin DeFi. And actually talking with some of the wallets, some of these guys would like to make it even like simpler where you've got integrated APYs and you actually can have integrated wallets being populated in one dashboard. So you can actually peek into both your Bitcoin and Cardano wallets simultaneously and you see it all there. And I think that's the world we want to be, where it's much more simplified, it's transparent, it's all there. There's going to be a lot of more bells and whistles in the back end, but that doesn't necessarily need to be front and center. Like speaking as like a Cardano guy who's been around for a long time, we often, like build first, and we can be very technical, and sometimes we miss the part of actually focusing on like a user experience that is really seamless. So that's something we need to do here with Layer 2 with Sundial. And so, yeah, it's got to be very easy. As I was mentioning, we want to have optionalities for people's risk appetite and for their yield generation. So you can actually have a bit of like a sliding scale, nice big buttons. It's all very clear. There is going to be
nodes that are going to be running the Sundial layer 2, and that's going to be available to all the various node operators currently operating for Cardano. But one of the important things that I should note, and it is like worth saying, is that because we are onboarding various institutional partners through Sundial for like Bitcoin and to come to Cardano, they do require some KYC permissioned nodes. And so it's going to be different from mainnet Cardano in the sense that it's not truly 100% permissions because we can't actually onboard North Korean node operators. We can't be onboarding, unfortunately, Iranians or like Russians currently. There's going to be these issues around sanctions that are going to need to be taken into account as an institutional layer for Bitcoin. And so it's something we've got to be very transparent with early on. So there are going to be some differences in some of the hardware, a lot of like the tech we're doing for Midgard. But it's worth saying that basically all Cardano projects will be interoperable with Sundial. So being a layer 2, it's quite different from the EVM side of things. We basically get to inherit most or all of the Cardano ecosystem on day one. There are going to be some adjustments that might need to be made just around costs and speed, just because it is going to be significantly cheaper and significantly faster than mainnet Cardano. And so once you take those changes into account, it's all fairly streamlined and fairly simple to build on.
So will I have to, rewrite smart contracts to have them on Sundial?
We're hoping no. The idea is no. If there is going to be some rewriting, it might just have to account for, as I was mentioning, just the fact that the gas and some of the fees are going to be significantly lower and speeds are faster. But besides those, it might not actually affect most dApps. And so you could just be interoperable with Sundial day one.
Yeah, that sounds great, and also great to hear you're still working with Midgard as a level 2. I know we are not part of Anastasia Labs, and I saw Phil up here for a sec. But how is Midgard coming along? Are we going to be on time with Midgard to make a decent rollout for everything you're planning?
Yes. So the timing is very much linked up because we're doing quite a lot of this development together. It's all simultaneous. We're all kind of collaborative here. And so the progress on Midgard has actually been really great. There's a lot of demos that were done. If you guys recall, a few weeks ago in Vietnam for the Builder Fest, there was a demo done for Midgard. So you can now have transfers kind of going live and working across the layer 2, which is very cool. The next phase, I don't know if Phil's here now or anybody else from Anastasia Labs, but I'm just going to mention the big focus now is actually around smart contracts, making sure that those are battle tested and basically waterproof. And it will take a few months, admittedly, but progress is being made. And so I still estimate that it will probably take till probably the end of the year for it to kind of hit kind of a production status to be ready to kind of go out and be truly kind of published. So I'm hoping we can speed some things up if we can kind of allocate some additional resources and get things going, because generally, as we know in this space, security matters, and often the audits take the longest time. We've got to make sure there's no vulnerabilities here. It's just got to work. So yeah, so ultimately, I think we're on track. There can always be roadblocks and bumps along the road, of course. So I have to have a little bit of understanding that it might not come together exactly on the date that was promised, but I think we're going to be pretty close to hitting it.
Yeah, it was an interesting point you made earlier about the sanctions, and I almost wonder if that's kind of a certain direction that our world's heading, kind of less of a global world and kind of more of a segmented world, just due to wars out there, or different policy changes, and I think that is kind of the direction that we're heading. That's ultimately what comes with regulation, I think, is, it takes a little bit of the permissionless part away. And I think that, permissionless services are still going to be out there, but there's definitely a lot of people in the world that still want to use permissioned systems, and they want to have somebody that's ultimately kind of a bit accountable for, where their yield's coming from, or, what service is being offering. On the Âtrium side, it's been a pretty big week. When I got back from Toronto, I was sent the link for Atrium on mainnet, and we've got all of our smart contracts live on mainnet now. It's I would call them the test versions of the smart contracts. They're not the final ones that we're going to push out there for all of you guys. But I have deposited into staking baskets on mainnet. I have minted a profile on mainnet. I did a little tweet earlier where I said I was going to send some ADA to somebody through Atrium on mainnet. So we're rocking and rolling. We're getting there, and it's really exciting. It's been, I think, at this point almost 2.5 years since we got started, and we're ready to go live with all of this. And this is 1.0 that we're launching with. There's a lot more features that are to come, but I think you guys are going to be really excited with what we have here. We're going to have a lot more announcements coming out over the next month. Different partnerships. The kind of, we're going to be releasing this in a cycle. There's going to be kind of different features launching at different times. There's a whole new leveling system. There's all new backgrounds, all new images. Even the minting is a bit different now. So I think that you guys are going to be really happy once we launch mainnet. And the first thing to launch, I'll say, is profiles. So it's coming. We're cooking. We've been switching everything over to mainnet, and it's pretty complicated, to be honest with you. We're getting through it. We're not running into any issues or any problems. There's just some subtle changes that we have to make going from testnet to mainnet. For example, prices. We have a coin market cap style list within Atrium, and on testnet there wasn't real tokens out there, whereas now there are, and everybody's real NFTs and real tokens, and we're switching everything over, and it's looking good. It's one of these days I'm going to come on this Twitter space and give you guys a date, and it's going to be damn exciting. And I it's hard to time anything, but with Bitcoin hitting an all-time high, it seems like we did all right on the building in the bear and launching in the bull thing. It's not like ADA's over $3, but I can't complain about 77 cents today. We did have a good question from the audience as well, relative to Sundial. What is the redeem code for today? So we have an XP system within Atrium, and what you can do is you come to our Twitter Spaces, or maybe we're on a Sundial Twitter Space. We'll have special redeem codes for our audience that allows them to level up their profiles and unlock new backgrounds and new avatars and eventually new titles. So what's the redeem code today, Stephen?
Redeem code for today is Sundial DeFi with a space in between. So Sundial DeFi. There were a few users that already guessed it, but I made it a bit more difficult this time.
Gotta start making them tricky. They're catching on to us.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So for the question that I had for you, Sheldon, I think this is a good question. It'll allow you to kind of explain the nuances between an L1 and L2. But Nomadico, he asked, why not just pursue this on the L1?
It is a good question. And so actually a lot of the development work we're doing is actually plugging into the L1 first. So a lot of like the bridges, it is plugging into Cardano first and foremost as on the layer 1 side of things. Because it's just going to have more impact. It's going to be more secure. And everything that works on the layer 1, as you mentioned, will also work on the layer 2. But at scale, and this is kind of like the crux of the question, like why an L2? Well, the reality is that if we have even like a tiny amount of Bitcoin coming over and there's some hyperactivity that accommodates that liquidity, we will clog up Cardano so much that it will slow to a crawl. Because unfortunately today we still are a ways up from layouts. We do need scaling solutions, and we need them quite badly. Cardano is like excellent being like a deterministic blockchain, right? So we know how much these transactions are going to cost. If ADA is getting up to $3, $6, $9, small transactions are going to be becoming more and more expensive. It's a wonderful thing to have that economic activity on chain, but it can also make some activities just prohibitively expensive. And so it means that layer 2s, certainly like Cardano layer 2s, UTXO, layer 2s, are going to be basically custom built to allow for scalability without compromises to the layer 1. There's, as you mentioned, the question about like, why would Bitcoin maxis care? What does all of this matter? Well, we want to, again, on the layer 2, incentivize Bitcoiners to come over by giving them an authentic Bitcoin experience that can be custom built on the layer 2. So everything is priced in Bitcoin, your rewards are in Bitcoin, yield is in Bitcoin, everything is orange, and it's fast and it's cheap. So we think together that's a pretty attractive proposition. And so that's why the layer 2. There's a number of reasons, but yeah, hope that all makes some sense.
And to add to that, of course, as you mentioned before, the TradFi side of things has some requirements as well. And yeah, Cardano is permissionless, so everyone can run a node, but that also doesn't always line up with the requirements that that Web 2 has. So to complement
Yes, exactly right. Like if we are onboarding banks, and if we are looking at working with some of the larger institutions in the world, they do need to have some assurances that we don't have yield generation going to node operators in North Korea. That is like the nightmare scenario. We don't want to give North Korean agents, the Lazarus Group, or anybody else access to yield generation with U.S. securities or Bitcoin collateral, right? And so unfortunately, there's going to be some limitations that can't be done on the layer 1 that we can do in the layer 2. So once again, like modularity. So we think that by building this layer 2, we solve for many, many, many issues, and we have something that is tailor fit to augment and to complement Cardano in the highest form, and Bitcoin at that. So.
Yeah, when we started Atrium 2.5 years ago, I bought the domain, atrium.us and atrium.eu, because I kind of envisioned this future where we would have to have, essentially permissioned front ends, that kind of allow you to use permissionless blockchains. And, just kind of the idea of a L2 doing that for you, I think that could offer a lot of value to DApp, or to front end developers, DApp developers, etc. Because at the end of the day, we do live in the real world, right? And we have to follow the law and meet the regulation. And so, I think that having an L2 that kind of does that automatically it would be good. I think a lot of people would definitely like that. And if somebody wants to have a permissionless version of the L2, it's going to be open source, right? Midgard. So they could still, do so if they wanted to.
Yes, absolutely. So all of the back end work here, it's all open source. So if you want to run with it, go for it. So that's like the lovely thing. I should mention that just to kind of like warn everybody who thinks like, oh yeah, I'll just stand up my own L2. We've seen there be issues on the Ethereum side, but I'm not too worried about that. We've got some unique solutions to kind of help kind of balance out and link up liquidity on the Cardano side. But more than anything, running an L2 and the infrastructure behind it is very expensive. And so if anybody wants to be building an L2, do reach out to the guys at Anastasia Labs if you've got like you think an ambitious idea that could like be custom built on the L2. They are all ears for hearing new solutions. There's actually going to be a number of additional Cardano L2s that are going to be announced in the next several months. And some of them are, tailor fit for particular use cases, which is going to be very exciting.
Awesome. For anybody just tuning in, if you have any questions about Bitcoin DeFi, Sundial, now's your chance. Sheldon's been, in Silicon Valley networking with a lot of the main minds behind, Bitcoin DeFi and Layer 2. So you have a great opportunity here. How can people support Sundial or Midgard at this point? Is there a Discord? Is there a way for kind of developers to contribute at this point?
It's a very good question. As of right now, there's not too much we can do to say open the floodgates, just because there's still a lot of moving pieces on the back end tech side of things. But that is going to be a thing we do in the next several months. So there is going to be a test net that will go out, like I was mentioning, hopefully 3 months or so from now, and that will be when we kind of want to get people out there, like actually breaking things if all possible, seeing where we can kind of improve the experience and improve upon security. As of this moment, there isn't too much. I would say, like, do kind of just continue to support what we're doing, like publicly on X and various spaces like this, creating awareness. Anastasia Labs did, thankfully, get the whole proposal to have Midgard added onto the roadmap for Cardano development, which is excellent. And so we've got a lot of momentum there. And so when it comes to essentially support, just kind of continue doing what you guys are doing now. Stay up on the latest. Go to the Sundial website and sign up for the newsletter. We're going to be doing more announcements about partnerships and the tech integrations and everything kind of in the coming weeks and months ahead. So that's it for now, because we don't want to get people too excited. And there is quite a lot of concern around launching a token or launching this or that incentives when there isn't really a need to do it. It's got to make sense. We've got to have deliverables presented. We've got to have a product first. And once it's all kind of ready to go, we'll make everybody aware and open up the doors. So, yeah.
That makes perfect sense. You know, that's the same reason that the Atma DAO hasn't launched and the Atma token hasn't launched. I think ultimately in today's time, there needed to be actually a utility for the token and a product, you know, for the token and a reason for it to be there. The alternative was this token launched, you know, last year, you know, say in June time, and that it would have just been another token, you know, with nothing to use it with, and, you know, win, 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 win. So I definitely like that strategy.
So we're coming up to the end of the hour, Sheldon. Is there something that we haven't covered yet that you want to share or ask even?
Well, I think we've covered quite a lot, and so it's like wonderful to have all you guys join the space. And if there's anything you want additional questions on or more curious about, I'm always open. So feel free to DM me. Stay connected to the team. There's going to be a lot more announcements coming down the pipeline the next several weeks and months ahead. Do also, like I was saying, keep your eyes on what has been coming out of Silicon Valley here in the Draper U program for Cardano, because the teams have been cooking like crazy. And so we're going to see some really exciting things get announced there. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you guys are building your own projects and you're looking primarily to build on Cardano and Bitcoin, because this is going to be the narrative that really is going to move the needle for all of us, keep it going. Do reach out to me because I'll see what we can do collaboratively. And yeah, do prepare to actually get out and have some pitches ready for investors, because people are looking at Cardano in ways that just wasn't happening a few years ago. So we've got a very promising spotlight on us now to change the narrative and to change the game. And so, yeah, that would be it from me. And so, as I was mentioning, always open to messages and questions. So DM me anytime. And want to thank you guys for hosting this space. So Big Pay, thank you very much. Âtrium Labs, guys, thank you so much for putting this together. It's wonderful to be back and to talk about all the things we've been doing on the Sundial side. Looking forward to being back here in maybe a few weeks or a few months and giving you some bigger updates on where we're at.
Seems like everything that
Thank you for being.
yeah, seems like everything that you're cooking up, we should have you on every week actually. But we'll take every few months an update for every few months would be nice. Yeah.
Too busy hanging out with Tim Draper. But thanks for doing the work out there, Sheldon. We appreciate it. And thanks for coming here and taking some time to educate all of us. I'm looking forward to Sundial, and I'm looking forward to having you on again. Thank you to everybody in the audience. Next week, or is it World Mobile that we have on, Stephen? It's 16 UTC, Wednesday.
Definitely. World Mobile is up next week. And yeah, it's going to be another great space. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Sheldon and Peyton, for the great discussions. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
See you guys.